Welcome to Frost Astrophotography and this PixInsight Comet tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to process a comet, and specifically the Comet C2022E3ZTF using PixInsight and the Comet alignment process. For this tutorial, you will need to have light frames for LRGB filters, and you need to have calibrated them using your flats and darks. What I normally do is that I use the subframe selector to select my frames, and that process is helping you to measure the different parameters of the image, the FWHM, the eccentricity of the stars, the number of stars, and so on. It can also help you with a weighting score of the frame for the image integration later on. It's not that important for this project, but if you have a lot of frames, you might want to exclude some of the frames if they are very bad, and that is not counting the frames that you manually go through using Blink, for example. But I am quickly going to run through my frames. I'm going to take my calibrated frames, starting with my blue, and I have 20 of them, and I just want to measure my subframes at this point. And the important thing here is that you have your subframe scale, the pixel scale of your system, camera and telescope, and the gain value. Now this can be found in a FITS header of a light frame that you have. And then just apply global to this and let it run through the subframes. It has completed on the first set of light frames, and I'm going to use a couple of formulas here. If you want to exclude some of your frames depending on the results here, I'm going to drag this over here so that we can look at the numbers that are relevant. I'm going to sort this on weighting, and the weighting, I'm using a special formula here that I found online. I'm using this for all of my projects. So I'm going to open up a new notepad so you can see the formula in its entirety. So what this formula says is that it is taking into consideration the FWHM, the eccentricity of the stars, and the number of the stars in some kind of mathematic formula that I must admit I don't fully understand, but it seems to work fine. I can also specify approval rates here. I want to approve everything with an FWHM below 6 and eccentricity below 0.6. And you can adjust this to your liking. My conditions were not great on the evening in question, so I don't have the best numbers here. You can see that it spans from around 4 all the way up to right above 6. So I'm going to increase this to 6.1 because I want to keep all of my frames here regardless. But the important thing here is to make a note of the frame with the best quality overall, and that is the highest weighting here, or the frame with the most stars, because that can be used as your reference frame later on when you integrate. So let's sort by stars here and descending, and we can see that we have blue 0019. That is the highest amount of stars. So for blue, I'm going to record the amount of stars and the frame. And what's important now is that we want to use the weighting here when integrating. So I simply don't want to close this. I want to output these frames with the weight information in it. So I have a folder here called Light Frames Approved. I'm going to select that folder. I'm going to specify to add a keyword called SSWeight. And it's going to add the weighting score of these frames. So I'm going to select output subframes here. I have the folder already, and I'm going to execute that. And then it's going to write a copy of the approved light frames with the weighting score. And now it is simply a matter of repeating these steps for the other frames. So I'm taking green here, I have 20. I'm switching over to measure subframes, and I'm executing that once more. The green has finished. We can see that we have slight improvement here of all frames. One important thing to note here is that for a normal object, it's not a problem to exclude frames here and there. For a Comet image, you would need to keep all of the images that you acquired, at least not disturb the feature in Comet alignment that calculates the Comet movement based upon the time of capture. So if you have gaps or holes in the series of images, you might have problems. We can see here that we have a good eccentricity. We have, fair FWHM considering my equipment. And the best frame is 0010 at 867 stars. So 0010, 867 stars. And I'm going to output subframes, keep the folder here, and execute that to write the approved subframes for green in the folder. Next up is the luminance. 20 of those, measure and execute. And the luminance has finished. We can record the 0011 as our reference, and we have 1100 stars. So I'm thinking this is going to be the main integration reference file. Going to output these as well. And then we are going to clear and add the final batch of light frames for the red filter. 20 of those, measure and execute. And the red has finished with a reference frame of 0018 at 995 stars. We are going to select output subframes here as well, and then execute that to write the last 20 frames to our approved folder. Next step is to open up the star alignment process, and you are going to add the files, and that is the files that we just wrote to the approved folder. Now these images or light frames, they are both calibrated and approved, as you can see by the C and A here. Select all, in my case 20 of each, LRGB 80 light frames. Now we want to have a reference image, and the reference image in this case should be a light frame that has the most stars. It is best to select that, because then you are fairly certain that it will be the best alignment possible. In this case, it is the luminance frame 0011. I'm going to go into the same folder, the approved. And I'm going to open up the 0011 luminance frame. Now this is my reference frame. I don't want to generate any drizzle data. I want to output these files into a light frame registered folder inside of this project folder, so I know where they are. I'm going to leave all the other settings at default, or if you look at my PixInsight 4-part tutorial, I'm covering the star alignment process in more detail if you need to. So what's left to do now is to execute this and let it run through. The star alignment or registration has completed, and now we are going to integrate the light frames, and we need to integrate the different filter frames individually, because we are running mono. If you have a one-shot color camera here, you will do this one time. We're going to open up our calibrated, approved, and registered light frames, beginning with blue here. If I want to, I can set a reference, and if you remember, for blue it was 19. So I'm going to select 19, I'm going to click set reference, and I'm going to use the fits keyword here as a weighting. So fits keyword, and if you remember from the subframe selector, you type in SS weight. And there's nothing much more to do right now than to integrate this into a blue master light. And then you of course do the exact same thing with the green, the luminance, and the red. And the integration has completed. I can open up a screen transfer function and stretch it. And you can see that the Comet has moved a bit in this, but that's okay, because we only need this for the stars. So this is blue, I'm going to save that as in linear mode as B. I'm going to clear this. I'm going to add my green frames here. 20 of them. And I have a reference frame of 10. Set reference and the same fits keyword as weight, and then integrate. We have the finished green here. I'm going to stretch that as well. I'm going to name it G for green. And I'm going to save it into my linear processing folder. Then I'm going to take my 20 luminance frames, and number 11 was the best set reference, and keeping the fits keyword as weight, I will execute that as well. And we have luminance finished here. We have a lot of detail in this one. I'm going to set the identifier, and I'm going to save that as luminance. And finally going to add the last filter, the red, 20 frames here. And number 18 was the best. So I'm going to set reference, keeping the fits word as weight, and execute that. And the final red frame has finished. Checking that one as well. Setting the identifier and saving that. Now this means that I have finished with the image integration of my 4 filters for the stars. Now I will of course need to process those images, but I'm holding off with that for now. Instead, I'm going to start with the alignment of the Comet, and I'm going to use the process that is simply called Comet alignment. And I'm going to add all of my files that are registered, the aligned, not the approved, not the calibrated, but the registered files that are aligned with each other. Starways, anyway. So I don't need to separate the filters at this time. I'm simply adding all of my Comet data. And one crucial thing for a complete success with this is that you actually took these in a series. It doesn't matter if you needed to change filters manually or refocus or something else between filters, but during each filter it is very good if you have the images in a sequence. As you can see here, I have 60-second exposures, and it's only a 1-second gap. It is almost exactly 60 seconds between each light frame. And when we come down here to the filter change, you will see that we have a 3-minute gap. And during those 3 minutes, my equipment changed filters, and it also ran through an autofocus routine. But this won't be a big issue. It will be fine. What we need to do now is to click on this output directory, and we're going to select a directory to put the Comet aligned frames in. So I've created a directory for that. I'm going to select that folder. I'm going to keep the postfix as CA, that stands for Comet Alignment. I'm going to click on the Show First Image. I will need to use a screen transfer function to stretch that image. And what I need to do now is to zoom in on the nucleus of the comet and place a circle and a cross exactly in the nucleus. I then click on the last image, and I'm going to repeat that process by stretching and zooming in, clicking on where I believe the nucleus of the comet is located. So what will happen now is that the Comet alignment process has calculated the trajectory of the comet in between, and it is now going to line up on this comet, changing the background and the stars and making the nucleus the primary point to be centered on. Now you could actually play around with some settings here, but I keep everything as default and just run through this and let it do its job. And the comet alignment process has finished. We can check out the comet path mask or image here, and we can see that it is fairly good. The moon, I don't know exactly what happened here, but I'm hoping that it won't be a problem. It looks like that I have a fairly good movement or path. We can close this. The next step is to integrate the Comet aligned images, but I do not want the stars in those frames. And there are options in Comet alignment to integrate and remove stars. You can also play around with the settings in the image integration process to try and remove stars from the frames, but I don't really like the results. And for this tutorial, I'm actually going to test out something that I saw in another video, and that was using the star exterminator on each of the frames before actually integrating them. Now, my computer is rather old, and Star Exterminator takes a while, even for a few frames. So I'm guessing that this is going to take a lot of time. But in Star Exterminator, we have a process batch feature. I can use that feature to tell PixInsight and Star Exterminator to remove the stars for all of my images. So I don't need a star image, and I don't need on-screen stars. I'm simply going to click on Process Batch, and I made a new folder inside Lightframe's Comet Aligned that is called Starless. I'm going to select that, and I'm not going to check output stars because I'm not creating any star images, and I'm not clicking on-screen stars, but I want to add to the file name, and I think Star Exterminator use underscore stars. So I'm going to select input files. I'm going to go into the folder, the project folder that I have now, the Comet and Comet aligned. Here you have the starless folder, and these files are calibrated and approved and registered and Comet aligned. And now I want to select all of them. And I want to remove the stars for all of these 80 files and not save any star images. And I'm going to click OK to that. And now I'm going to let this work through the images and come back when it has finished. The Star Exterminator process has finished batch processing all of the 80 light frames that I have on the Comet. We're going to open up one of those to see the results. I'm going to select a luminance, and we're going to stretch that to see. We can see here that we have a fairly good result, and I only have a couple of residual stars here and some other smaller artifacts. I can imagine that this varies in the 80 different light frames, because this comet actually is moving in this direction as well in the frames. The next step is to integrate the different channels L, R, G, and B for the starless images, and at the same time try to address the artifacts that we can see here. I'm going to open up my image integration, and in this I have the settings for my normal integration, and I would want to tweak these a bit to be able to see if I can actually remove these small artifacts from the stars. I'm going to start with the blue frames. I have 20 of those. I'm going to make sure that these are the starless images that we produced using Star Exterminator from the Comet aligned images. Important to use those because we want the Comet to be aligned in this process, of course. We're going to look at the image integration settings here. We can use average, and we also can use additive with scaling, and we're not really needing to do any weighting here, but since I have the SS weight fits keyword in my light frames anyway, I'm going to let that be in there, but you can use no normalization in this process. I'm going to try the linear fit clipping, and that is working good for 15 frames or over. In my case, I have 20 light frames for each filter, and I think that will work. You could use Sigma clipping or winsorized Sigma clipping here as well. That is also something that takes less time than the linear fit clipping. Scale +0 offset, and make sure that you clip low, high, and low range and map range rejection. The most important settings here, I would say, is the pixel rejection. That is the thing that controls the amount of pixel rejection that take place, and in fact what you actually remove from the image. What you are going to adjust, you could adjust the fit low range, but I've tested this extensively before recording this video, And I didn't notice that big of a difference for the low setting here. But for the high setting, you want to have this as low as possible without affecting the Comet. I tried running this at 0, but then I noticed that a lot of data in the actual Comet and in the tail was lost. So I'm guessing that a setting of around 0.8 is going to work. Then it will remove a lot of these artifacts or everything and still keep the information in the Comet that you actually want to keep. If it doesn't work with 0.8, or if you still have artifacts, you might try to decrease it to 0.7 or even lower, but I'm guessing that it will remove data in your Comet. So when thinking about it now, I actually remembered that I think I came to the conclusion that 0.9 was the better setting for me anyway. So 5 and 0.9, and we are going to keep the rest of the settings, and we are going to execute this. And it has finished. We can see that it has rejected a lot of information here, and now it's going to be exciting. I'm going to close this because that is the luminance. I'm going to open up the first blue frame, and we are going to stretch that, and we are going to compare it to this frame that is an integration of all of the blue light frames, and we will see what has happened to the artifacts. There's a lot of artifacts in the blue here. We have some stars here, and we have some dots and information, some gradients here. So interesting to see. And it looks like it has handled that very well, I would say. There's no stars here. There is some very small faint residue down here from that star that it hasn't removed altogether, but I would say that there is a risk of removing Comet information if you lower the value even more. So I'm pretty happy with this. We're going to call this the, not luminance, it is the blue Comet. We are going to save that into our linear folder as B Comet. We're going to clear this, and we're going to add the next batch, and that is the green filter 20. I'm going to keep all the settings, and I'm going to execute that integration. And we have the finished green here. I'm going to stretch that. And that looks good as well. I'm going to set that identifier to G Comet. I'm going to save that in the linear folder. I'm going to clear that list, and I'm going to add the next set of light frames for the luminance filter and integrate that. And we have luminance finished. Going to close these rejections and take a look and stretch the luminance, and it looks fine. I'm going to identify this as the L Comet and save that. And the final, going to clear this and select my red filters frames 20 and execute that. And the final integration here with the red. Some small residues, but I'm fairly confident that we can handle that. So L, R, G, and B here for the Comet. And I'm going to open up the earlier processed images, L, R, G, and B, for stars that we made earlier. Here we have those. L, stars, R, G, and B. We are in the first steps of the linear processing phase, and we have L, R, G, and B master frames for the stars and for the comet here. And we can see in these images the comet is stationary and the stars or the image move, and in these the stars are stationary and the comet is moving. And now we need to do some processing on these before we can continue and integrate them. Starting with the Comet images, I want to do some dynamic background extraction. I'm also thinking that we are going to do or have to do some dynamic cropping here, because I don't think it's going to fix the sharp lines here and make it possible for this to be introduced onto a star image, but we can try. So we're holding off on the dynamic crop for now. We are going to do a dynamic background extraction, and for this it's not so important because you don't have any stars here, so we can just place sample points here. Everything is the background. And we're going to do the same here. Make sure that you don't hit anything on the actual comet or the tail. That will be bad. Something like that. Now we want to execute this on all of the frames. So I'm going to save an instance of this process to my workspace, and I'm going to use that on all images. So I'm going to execute this. And it has made a new image. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to stretch the new DBE to see if we have, yes, we can see that it has handled some of the background here. And this is already called _DBE, so we're just going to save that as Comet DBE and close the original one, replacing them. Opening up the R, opening up this and execute that. And take a look at the result. That seems fine. Going to save that as DBE as well. And replace the original image. Continue with the green. Check on that. Looks fine as well. Save that image. And finally, the blue. And stretch that as well. And save it as DBE. Now I want to do a dynamic background extraction for my star images as well. So I'm going to open up a dynamic background extraction again. And I'm going to place some sample points here. I don't need to be that careful, but you don't want to hit any stars in this image, of course. So I'm going to place some samples here. You could do this automatically as well. It's not even that super important to run DB on this because we're going to remove the stars and use those, but I'm going to save an instance of that and I'm going to execute it. And let's check out the results here. Stretch that. And I'm going to save that as DBE. And also, of course, do this on the rest of the frames. And the green. Stretch that as well and save it. And the blue here. And save that. Now we have the Comet aligned frames with the dynamic background extraction, and we have the star frames with the dynamic background extracted. The next phase is to linear fit the star images to each other. And for that, we're going to select a reference, and I'm selecting the luminance. And we're going to execute this on the rest of the frames. When it has finished, you might need to reset the screen transfer function. And I'm simply going to save this, not as a new file. The next step in the linear phase is to do deconvolution or run blur exterminator. I actually tried this earlier and I did not like the result at all. I don't know why that is, so I've decided not to do any more processing on the star images at this point. I'm going to manually stretch the images and I'm going to try to run Star Exterminator to remove the stars after. I'm going to open up all 4 images and I'm simply going to use histogram transformation to stretch the images. I'm starting with red. I'm just going to remove the screen transfer function and then select the image, and I'm going to stretch it manually like this. Going to reset the black point here to see what we can get out of this. Going to reset that again. And finally stretch it a bit more. Something like this. I'm now going to set the identifier just to R and save that into the non-linear. I'm going to continue with the luminance. Going to select that and then I'm going to stretch the image. And I'm going to set the identifier and save that in nonlinear as luminance. Moving on to the green. Something like that. Set the identifier to G here and save that in the nonlinear folder. The last frame is the blue. Selecting that and stretching the image. And I'm finished with that. Save that as well. Now I'm still in the linear phase for the Comet images, but I've moved on to the nonlinear phase for the star images here. And since I did not get a good result with Star Exterminator in the linear phase, I'm going to try to use Star Exterminator as the first process here in the nonlinear phase. So I'm going to open up Star Exterminator. I'm going to check the settings here. I'm going to generate a star image, of course, with the on-screen stars. And I also want to do a process batch. I'm going to go into the nonlinear, select that folder, and the same folder for the output of star files. I'm going to select these four. Let me just find the project folder here. Processing and nonlinear, and I'm going to select these four images. I'm going to try to produce star images for the four filters and then combine them into LRGB stars. Instead of combining these images into an LRGB image and then run Star Exterminator. That will introduce some weird color artifacts because the comet has moved. So I'm going to click OK here, and then I'm going to be back when it has finished processing. Star Exterminator has finished making star images of my 4 star frames. What we're going to do now before combining these into LRGB stars is that we're going to check for some residues of the actual comet and its movement in the star images here. We can see that for green, we have some residues here. One neat thing is that you can actually copy the zoom and position between frames if you just drag and drop them on top of the name. Then we can have a good starting point for searching for artifacts that we want to handle. You can see here on the luminance we have the same, and please keep in mind that the comet is moving between these, so the artifacts would not be on exactly the same place, but they would be near. So we have a little bit of residue here as well on the red. And we are going to check once more on the blue to see if we have something on the left here of that area. It does not look like we have anything. Could be on the right here. It could be that we have just one small little artifact here. I do believe that this is not a star, this is artifacts. What we will do to address this is that we are going to open up the clone stamp process. We're going to select an image. We're going to select a radius that is fairly small and increase the softness a bit. And then select an area where it is completely black, I would say over here. And then we're just going to erase the traces of these artifacts and execute them. We're going to change the identifier, keeping the original stars, naming this CS for clone stamp, just in case we have any issues with the frame later on when we combine it. Moving on to the blue, we're going to do the same here. Going to remove these few artifacts, and I'm going to set the identifier here to clone stamp and save this image as well. Remember that we are in the nonlinear phase for the star images, but we haven't reached that yet for the Comet images. They are still in the linear phase. So this is a bit tricky. This is absolutely an artifact. This as well, I think. And these 2 or 3 here are actually stars. So we're not going to manipulate them. And we're going to save that as well as underscore clone stamp. And the final luminance. Here we have the most artifacts. I think I will have to do this in 2. Keep in mind that this is a star. These are not stars. This is a star, I would say. These are not. Execute that. Set the identifier. Now, if you had integrated these as they were, I'm not sure that you would have noticed these small artifacts anyway, but I like to be thorough, and I do like to have the best result that I can get. Now we have fixed that. We are going to integrate these stars, and for that we're going to use the process LRGB combination. I'm going to select my sources, and they are the files that we just created, the L_stars_CS for clone stamp, and then I will select the other 3 as well, the green and the blue. I will also make sure to check the chrominance noise reduction feature here, and then I will execute this, apply global. There we have it. We're going to set the identifier LRGB stars. And we are going to save that as LRGB stars. Now we have lost, some color, I would say, during this process. We do have some nice color on the stars here if we zoom in. I think the star shape is good, the size is good as well. I would like to see maybe some more saturation in the stars. So I'm going to create a luminance layer. I'm going to extract the luminance. I'm going to use that luminance as a mask on the image here. You can see that we now have protected the background. If we invert that, we protect the stars, as you can see. We don't really need to do anything about the background because that is perfectly fine, since we used the create star image with the star exterminator. So invert it back to protect the background and disable show mask, and we can now open up a curves transformation and select a preview of the image, and we can then select the saturation to play with the saturation in this image. We can try and increase it a lot here. You will see that we are doing something with the stars. It might not be that noticeable, but the stars are fairly small. But if we reset it, you will see that it goes back to its original state. So I'm just going to slightly increase the saturation on the stars here, and I'm going to remove this, and we're going to zoom in on a star here. We can undo the curves transformation. We see that if we redo it, you see that we have increased the saturation just a little bit on the stars. So I think I will keep it like this. I'm going to remove the mask. I'm going to set the identifier here to color, so that I know that I have manipulated the colors of the stars, or I haven't actually changed the colors of the stars, but I have increased the saturation on the stars. So now that I am finished with these, I can delete all of these icons. I don't really need to have them on my workspace anymore. I have them saved so I can use them later, but I will take my LRGB stars color image and will save that in the corner here. So I know that I have finished with that. Next step is to continue the work on the Comet images, and now that we have our starless Comet aligned images, on which I've also run the dynamic background extraction, I'm going to linear fit these to each other. And that will involve opening up all of the images, opening a linear fit here, and selecting the luminance Comet image as a reference, and then align the rest of the images in terms of brightness to that one. When it has finished, you can remove the screen transfer function and then apply it again. And we will change the identifier to LF, that stands for linear fit. I will do it on the next image. And set the linear fit identifier and save this image as well. And on the final image identifier and save that. Now, just so that I know that I've completed this step, I will also open up the luminance and change the identifier to linear fit on that, even though I haven't manipulated the frame. But I've used it as a reference, so I know that I have completed this step. Next in line for these are usually some kind of deconvolution or blur exterminator, but we don't have any stars in the image here, so I really don't need to do that. I can use noise exterminator right now to try to remove as much noise as I can in the background of this image. Now, noise exterminator does not have a batch feature, so I will need to make an image container for these images. So in order to make an image container to be batch processed by something, you right click on the workspace and make image container. You can specify a base directory, and in this case we are still in the linear phase. I'm going to select the linear folder for both of these, both the base directory and the output directory. I can specify an extension on the file name here, or an output template, the file name, and then I want to have underscore nxt, and then I want to have the file extension. So it will actually add this to a new file when it saves it. I'm going to add files. I'm going to look in my linear folder. I want to process the images that I have on my workspace here. B, Comet, DB, linear fit, and the G, and the L, and the R. So these 4 images I want to run noise exterminator on. I want them to be output in the same directory, and I want the images to add NXT extension. So when I'm finished with this configuration, I am actually going to save an instance of this image container on the workspace, close this, and then I'm going to open up noise exterminator. If I want to do several things, let's say I want to add more than one process, I can open up processes, all processes, and I can open up a process container. It will let me add different processes to a list of things to apply to the images in this container here. So I'm simply going to take my noise exterminator. I'm going to select my AI. It was already selected. I'm going to use the default settings. I'm going to drag an instance of this into my process container. I'm going to close my noise exterminator. I'm going to take my process container. Now I could add more things here, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to take a new instance of this, drag it onto my workspace, and save it there. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm basically just going to drag the process container over to the image container, and PixInsight will start to work on those images. And when that has finished, I will come back and we will continue with the processing of the Comet images. Noise exterminator has finished processing my frames here, and it is time to manually stretch the Comet images and move over to the non-linear phase for those as well. I can delete the image container and the process container. I'm starting with the luminance here. I've removed the screen transfer function, and I'm going to work with the histogram transformation here for the Comet. Stretching can be done in several different ways, of course. I really like the manual histogram transformation way, but I'm guessing that this is a very personal preference. So I'm bringing out the data here. I'm going to reset the black point. This little spike here is, of course, the black frame around the edges. the stacking artifacts, so to speak. But I'm carefully stretching this image here, trying to bring out details and trying to keep the background as black as possible here. So I'm thinking I'm going to stay with something like that. And now I'm going to reset the identifier to Comet, and I'm going to save this in the nonlinear folder as Comet. And that is going to be the image that we are saving to further process. So moving on to the next color frame here, or the filter, and that is the red. Now I'm working with the same principles here, stretching the image, bringing out as much data as we possibly can out of this. Also working with resetting the black point as we move along here. But we really want to bring out as much data as possible here and not to overexpose the background too much. So that's always challenging. Keep in mind that we are going to need to do a lot of adjustments on this later on as well, because we have some issues with the background here, but something like that. Going to set that identifier as well, Comet, and save that in the nonlinear folder as Comet, and minimize that. Moving on to the next filter, the G here, green. Stretching, bringing out data, resetting the black point here as we move along. Bring out more of that faint little comet. This, of course, can be done with different tools. I've mentioned that in other videos as well, but never really myself gotten around to looking into things like the generalized hyperbolic stretch or something like that. I'm thinking I will have to do that one of these days. G Comet. I'm going to save that in the correct folder. Now it's beginning to stack up here on images, a lot of different images, but that's okay. We can delete these when we are finished with them if we don't want to save them. And you know, it's just a single image or a couple of them. It doesn't take that much room. We're trying to get somewhat similar stretch parameters for these images. It's not crucial, I would say, but you know, it's always going to be a better result later on when we integrate these into LRGB if we have a somewhat similar stretching done to them. Something like that. And the last one, B Comet. And we are going to save that in the nonlinear folder as well as B Comet. Now that I have my stretched images for all frames, I can do two different things. I can either work on each frame separately here and then integrate them, or I can integrate these and then work on the integrated image. I have a challenge here, and that is these stacking artifacts. And I could use clone stamp and try to neutralize the seam here between background and this black border, but I'm not going to have data for all, so I'm just going to crop this away. I have made my decision to do that. So I'm going to open up dynamic crop here, and I'm going to do this before integrating the frames. So I'm going to drag this in. I'm going to drag this up. I'm going to see how much I need to crop away here. This would of course be better if I had more image data to work with, but I'm going to make it easy on myself and crop this away. So before cropping now, I'm going to save these parameters because I'm going to have to crop my star image as well. So I'm applying that, and the same here. I'm going to open up this and apply that crop for my green. I'm going to open up and apply that crop for my red. And I'm going to open up and apply that crop for my luminance as well. I'm also going to open up my stars and make a copy of that. And I'm going to open up my crop and apply that to the stars as well. I'm going to save that as crop. So I have it available later when I need to integrate this. And then I'm going to open up my process LRGB combination. I'm going to select these four Comet images, L, R, G, and B, as you see on the screen, and with the chrominance noise reduction, and I'm going to apply that globally to execute it. And here we have the final image. I'm going to set the identifier here as LRGB Comet. And we're gonna have to work on this because, as you can see here, we have some background issues, gradient, etc. But I'm going to try to keep as much as possible of the data here. I'm going to see if I can make an initial curves adjustment without destroying too much data. Maybe just a little here, something like that. We do have some residual things in the background. Let's see if we can make a range mask with the range selection here. Maybe try and isolate the comet in this range mask only. This is just for the color correction because I want to remove. We have some colors in the background here that I don't want to keep. So I'm going to apply this range mask to the image, and we're going to invert it because we're now protecting the background and I want to protect the Comet area. Disable show mask, and then we can open up curves and select saturation here and the preview, and then we can drag this down and apply it. That way we are removing any color gradients whatsoever on the bigger background here, taking care of that area. If we want to, we can also try to invert this mask and do the same procedure to see if we can, increase the saturation of this, because we might want to have more green and colors here. Maybe just a little bit, something like that. Keep in mind that we're also increasing this total area, so be careful with that. I'm thinking now that we can extract the luminance to make a more precise mask. So I have extracted the luminance here. I'm going to open up curves and adjust my luminance on the RGB channel. I'm going to bring down, first of all, open up a preview. I'm going to bring this down to something like here, and then apply that. And now I have a mask that is more precise than the range mask. I'm going to apply that to my image here. And I'm going to show mask, and I'm going to invert it. And now we're keeping the Comet, and we can adjust the background. So disable show mask and open up curves again. Keep it on RGB with a preview on. And now we can try to adjust the background even more. Bring it down. We can increase the contrast ever so slightly if we want to. Something like that. I'm going to remove this mask now, and I'm going to set the identifier to BG for some initial background adjustments on this image. Now I do have some steps in my normal processing routine, and we can try to execute the multiscale linear transformation tool to sharpen the object a bit here. So we're going to do a new luminance extraction. We're going to open up a histogram transformation and select the new background loom, and we're going to open up a preview and adjust this slightly to make it less bright. We're going to apply this luminance mask to the image and use it as is, not invert it anything. And then open up our multiscale linear transformation. Now we can copy the settings here, but this is for details. So we're going to apply that. We can see that we don't have that big of an impact on this, but I'm going to let it be. I'm also going to run through unsharp mask with the same mask on here. And the settings, like you see, 0.9 and 0.82 lightness as target. Now this slightly sharpened the image here. It's very hard to see the results because of the nature of the comet here. So we're going to remove that mask and we're going to call this sharp so that I know that I have run through some sharpening processes on the Comet. Now one of the final steps is to do some noise reduction on the actual Comet here. And we will do that with the TGV denoise. For that we're going to need some new masks. So I'm going to extract luminance again. I'm going to call that loom, and I'm going to make a copy of the loom, and I'm going to call that TGV because this is going to be a special mask that we're going to use to apply to this image. It's a low contrast mask. And for that we're going to open up curves transformation here. We're going to select RGB. We're going to drag this left lever here. Grab the corner, drag it up just slightly. We want numbers here, not position. So type in 0.2 and press tab or any other button and grab the right corner here and drag it down a bit. Type in 0.5 and tab, and then execute this onto the image. You can see that we have a very low contrast here. So then open up histogram transformation and select your TGB mask. And then drag this middle lever to the top of your histogram and execute that there. Now we're going to take our TGV mask, apply it to our image, and we are going to invert the mask. And then we are ready to open up the tool, the TGV denoise here. We have to make some settings. I want to have strength 4, edge protection 2, smoothness 2, and expand the local support section here and select the luminance mask that we made. So the TGV mask is actually applied inverted to the image, and the luminance mask is our local support image. And when that is completed, you can apply this to the image. And there it is finished. We can remove the mask. We can also see if we see any difference. You can see that it is rather noisy, and if we redo TGV denoise, it has smoothed out those sharp edges, but ever so slightly. So I'm going to name that noise, and I'm going to save it. Now we could do some final adjustments here. If we want to adjust color, for example, we can apply this mask again, the luminance mask that we made earlier. We can see what it is protecting, and well, I'm not sure that we can address the green there, so maybe try to make adjustments anyway. So we could We could open up curves transformation and see what it does on the entire image now, because there shouldn't be much saturation on the background at this point. So we're going to try saturation. We can try increasing that, see what happens. We could adjust that a little bit. We could also take the green here to see what will happen, but then it will basically color the entire image green. And for that to work, we need to decrease the other colors, but then it will make the entire image green. So no, we're not going to do that. For that, we could apply this luminance mask again, and then disable show, and try once again with the curves transformation and the green. Now we're only affecting this area. So preview, and what happens if we increase the green? It will make it more green in the core here. I might want to have a slight more greenish. Then bring down just to reset the brightness of the other channels here. Maybe, let's see what this does. So this is after we manipulated the green a bit there, and this is before. So we added some green around here. That might or might not be nice. I'm having a hard time deciding, but I think I'm gonna go with that. We're actually going to bring down the curves again, but I think we will wait until we integrate it, or maybe not. So I'm gonna try open up curves once more and go for RGB here, and then slightly reduce that, slightly increase the contrast, something like that. I'm going to type in color again to know that we have made a final color adjustment onto the tip or nucleus of the Comet here. So I'm going to take a copy of this, drag it over there, save that image, and I'm going to call this Starless, just because my script is designed that way. And I'm going to take this star image, the cropped one that fits this starless image, and I'm going to call this Stars. We're going to have to decide if we want to manipulate the stars anything. So I'm going to try an integration between the Comet and the stars using the pixel math formula for the unscreened stars here. So this is a screen join, and that actually joins the images inverted. So stars and starless, and I'm going to execute that. And let's see what happens. So, well, this is fairly good, I would say. We're going to adjust the curves here, but first of all, we're going to see if we like these star images. And considering the size of the comet here, I think the stars are good. We could do a test. We could take the star here, and I can take the curves transformation, and we could could decrease them a lot. And we can run through the pixel math one more time. And then we get a new image. So we have lesser stars and we have brighter stars. This more prominent stars and smaller stars. And I'm liking both. Maybe we want to focus more on the comet here. So I'm thinking that we're going to run with some smaller stars, but not as small as the one to the right here. So we're going to close that. We're going to undo this. And we're going to open up curves again for the stars here, but not shrink them as much as we did before. Maybe there. And then we're going to open up Pixel Mouth again and do a new combination. So the one on the right, I'm going to remove these up here. Move these out of the way as well. So the one on the right is with slight smaller stars, and this is a slightly bigger star. So I'm liking the one on the right here, actually. So I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to set the identifier. LRGB with LRGB stars, and I'm going to save that in the final folder. Now we can make some slight final adjustments to this Comet image. Since we join with pixel math and the screen function, we do get some extra brightness in the image. So we want to make a final adjustments with the curves to slightly bring that down. Not much, but slightly. And we could also adjust the contrast just a little bit as well. So let's look at what this looks like. And yeah, I'm fairly happy with this image. No, I did have a lot of challenges with my data. It was not the best data. It was not so much. I would have liked to have a different position for the Comet with a lot more tail. But, you know, we can always want for more, I would say. I'm going to open up an image of the last Comet that I made. And this is the last time I photographed this. So the image on the left here is the last photograph of the Comet that I made. And that was like something like January 3rd or something. And this is January 26th or something like that. So we have about 3 weeks between them, and you can see that we have actually increased a lot in size. The Comet is much more closer to Earth in the right image here in comparison to the left image. So I'm fairly happy with this, and I hope there will be many more comets to photograph in the future, and I hope you have enjoyed this PixInsight tutorial. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you like it, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment for me if you want to. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing not to miss out on future and upcoming content. If you want to support me and the work with these videos, there is an option listed in the video description that you can use. Until the next video, I wish you have some clear skies.